Hi, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from the Straight. Today, Tim is at Magic Millions in Perth. It's nice and early over there at the moment. We look at the WA market and speak to Magic Millions' David Houston. We examine Yulong's purchase of Angel Capital. In wagering, it's been a big week of news. More key departures at Entain, and Tabcorp's half-year results are out. And we'll round out with a change at Ciaron Maher's stable and the latest in the New South Wales racing politics. A quick message before we start. We get great feedback on this podcast from those of you who listen, and we really appreciate that. We're looking for some sponsors to come on board, and it's a really crucial message. This is the pitch that we need to make. Yeah, if you want to come on board, you think you want to, we add value and it's something that you'd like to be a part of, please email me at editor@thestraight.com.au with any ideas you may have, and happy to look at whatever proposals you want to put forward. But we think there's a good opportunity here to get a couple of sponsors on board and really power this podcast, given the positive feedback we've been getting. Businesses out of the road, Tim. You're at Perth, as mentioned. Look, WA is an interesting little world. It's its own little island over there in its own way. What's the vibe been? What's the vibe around the industry at the moment? And obviously heading into this sale, which starts today, what's the feeling among the local bloodstock industry?
It's interesting, Bren. I've been coming sort of post-COVID, which sort of, if people remember back that far, sort of early 2021 and so forth, where the WA trainers couldn't leave the state to buy in the other sales, so they just supported their local sale as they always had, but to a huge degree, and it's just growing with their local West Speed and West Speed Platinum bonuses. You can race, for a Saturday for $80,000 effectively against pretty much your own pool of horses that are either bred here or sold at the sale. And so it's just been going gangbusters. There's $20 million turned over last year. For this first time, sort of wandering around the sales ground yesterday, that little bit of pessimism or like, okay, maybe there's the economy starting to bite, not as much money around. Obviously, it's heavily mining-related economy over here, so plenty of spare disposable cash to spend on horses, and it maybe just might come back a fraction. I don't think it's going to probably drop to the degree that maybe the East Coast sales has, but still, it's just interesting that there's that little bit of pessimism that won't be as strong as it has, and there'll be that dreaded term selectivity that's been going around at the other sales, where people will pay for the good horses, but for the lesser horses, they might not.
We'll have a chat. Obviously you had a chat with David Houston yesterday, just sort of talking through the WA industry, where things sit, and there's some really interesting points in that discussion. But what I find interesting about the WA market, it is primarily from a bloodstock point of view, driven by the big trainers, isn't it, Tim? The big trainers are the ones that sort of, drive a lot of the purchases. And I guess their appetite for risk will probably determine, where this sale falls and sort of where the vibe around the breeding industry sits.
Absolutely. You've got sort of Neville Parner, Steve Wolf, Neville's sort of early 67, Steve Wolf's in his 70s, and he's still with us, thankfully, but he had a bad heart attack last year. And you've got some, Grant and Alana Williams are absolutely going gangbusters since they've sort of, 3 or 4 years since they split from Bob Peters, and they're sort of a younger brigade, I guess, and there's Simon Millers, but syndication finds it, doesn't have a massive foothold over here. The clients or the owners just seem to ring their trainer direct. It's sort of a bit more old school over here, and great place to race a horse. Importantly, from the breeder's point of view, you might look at the sale results and go, geez, 80,000 or whatever. You can't make money out of that on the East Coast, or it's harder to. Over here, but the service fees are much lower over here, so that's a huge input cost in production cost.
Yeah, I guess much more select group of stallions, I suppose, across the board. So I guess it's that little bit of isolation stuff. It's something that David Houston spoke about in his interview with you, Tim, and we'll hear from David now about how he sees the local industry and where things are heading.
David, I guess first of all, can you tell us, Western Australia is perceived as being, its own island almost in sort of racing economy and different things. Why is that, or can you explain that sort of a little bit more to those that aren't as familiar with WA racing and breeding?
Well, Perth is the most isolated city in the whole world, so we are our own country over here, make our own rules, which we have in the past, as you've seen. But I think racing here is strong because the Nullarbor actually divides us off. We just have our own pool of horses. We race against each other. We know each other's strengths, and I think the local economy can take confidence out of that they can buy into horses, race horses here, and understand that where they sit.
Every state does have a I guess, a breeder's sort of bonus scheme, whether it's Bob's or Cutis or Vobis, but West Speed and West Speed Platinum seem to arguably be the best in the country.
Yeah, everybody says that our scheme here is very good. I mean, if you're racing for double prize money, that's very handy. I think every bonus obviously probably got its benefits, but a bonus is a bonus, and our bonus is very, very good.
This time last year, you were very buoyant, I guess, and predicted that obviously the Eastern State sales had come off their sort of COVID highs and down, not an insignificant amount of money, but Perth, you hit sort of crash through 20 million and very strong sort of market. What are you predicting this year? I've been out and about speaking to a few people for the first time since I've been coming post-COVID. They're a bit apprehensive.
Yeah, I've got a big ego, so let's hope we can maintain it at least him. Whether we can advance that or we a little bit down, that's in lap of the buyers, obviously. But the horses are here, and doing my count back from last year's buyers, 99% of them are back here on the ground. So it's just a matter of them, having good support behind them, I guess, and we'll find that out in the next 2 days.
On the East Coast, I guess all the that's a professional market, the agents and trainers. And that still buy, but they've probably been a bit more selective, as we keep saying. Do you expect that to play out here as well?
Oh, yeah. Look, the good horses are still going to be, even in a softening market, good horses are harder to buy. They're still hard to buy. People will suss them out, but they can't all buy the same horse. So, that forces them onto something else. We don't have a big catalogue here, and I think that plays into our hands as well. So I think right through, there's plenty of good buying there. They're very viable in my mind, the yearlings here. So hopefully we can maintain some sort of level as last year.
And there is, a smattering of interstate buyers here. Brad Whittip I've seen, and Simon Hedge, I guess, helps Grand Alana Williams over here. But a few agents, but in the past certainly seems a difficult market for the interstaters to participate in.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They often say that they come over here and the locals are too strong for them. I mean, they certainly batted up last year, but, with people like McAvoy and Malcaster and co here on the grounds, I'm expecting they haven't come for nothing.
Yeah, some really interesting points there from David. And obviously, it's built up to the sale. We don't want to talk too much given the sales going on today and tomorrow, because people may not listen to this till the next couple of days and, things may have changed by that, Tim. But what's the WA racing and where things sit at the moment? Obviously, there's been some really good innovations. There's some positivity around a few aspects. There's probably a few doubts around a few things as well. We've had the water issue at Kalgoorlie, which has been temporarily resolved. We've had other issues with tracks, more regional tracks, like I think Albany is in a bit of strife at the moment, and a few things like that. I mean, WA, as I mentioned before, it is, we've spoken about it a few times, it is its own little island. But I mean, is there a feeling that there is a correlation between what goes on this side of the continent and what goes on that side of the continent, or is it purely sort of locally driven, Tim?
I think it's locally driven, but they're not immune to, wagering downturns. So, the Tab's still state-owned at the moment, publicly owned. So, they're not immune to that wagering downturn, whether they can maintain prize money, all that sort of thing that every other PRA has been dealing with. They have and will have to deal with as well. But it's still quite a positive state for racing, I would say, in comparison to, say, some others. You're heading to Tassie next week for their sale, and that's, going to be a challenge as well. So, they've got probably greater issues than what WA does at the moment.
Yeah. I don't, there's a Tassie sales on Monday, and we'll be there. Being a proud Tasmanian, always happy to be there and support the local sale and see what that things look like. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there, because there's some other challenges within Tasmania as well, as you mentioned. WA has got the state-owned Tab, and the prospect at some point that may be privatised is probably the biggest story going forward in WA racing. Tim, we'll move on now. Yulong purchased Angel Capital this week. Now, it didn't necessarily come as a surprise, because we've got the owners of Angel Capital aren't scared to trade them. Hong Kong-based upper bloodstock are quite happy to buy and sell as needed. And Yulong, obviously, very the most ready buyer in Australia, so that's not surprising either. But I guess wasn't necessarily we had a horse on our radar as a top stallion prospect, but a sneaky good horse. Like 4 wins out of 7, when he has won, he's won quite dominantly. And yeah, it's an interesting play from Yulong, isn't it?
He's sort of talking to a few people that are, Ross from Upper Bloodstock. The style of horse is probably a little bit like Private Harry both by Harry Angel at the moment. Sort of get better at 3, had to grow into their, quite sizable frames. So, as Ross told me, that they bought him to go to Hong Kong or potentially sell to Hong Kong, and he's still that style of horse where he's going to keep developing, they think. So the best, if you want to keep racing him on at 4, if he does happen to get his Group 1, this prep, he could race on at 4 with quite a fair bit of scope behind him and development. And his by Harry Angel is doing from a low base. I think he stood for 15,000 plus GST when he first came to Australia, and done it the hard way. But he's a good stallion for Darley, and there's second crop 3-year-olds, two very good horses in Private Harry and Angel Capital, and Yulong, there's just no stopping them. When they want a horse, they get the deal done. It didn't take, it took probably 6 or 7 days to get the deal done. So, it makes it very hard for the other smaller stud farms to get a stallion, but that's the game, isn't it? They've got the capital, dare I say it, to be able to buy these horses, maybe pay overs for them.
Yeah, I suppose so. But again, if you do the deal now, we think it's probably around about $4 million. You do the deal after the Australian Guineas, and you've probably got, $10 million at least, haven't you, Tim? So I guess from that, that perspective, if Yulong have done their due diligence and they think that he's the primary, and he's currently favourite for the Australian Guineas, it puts him in a good position. The Hong Kong angle is a bit fascinating because obviously we know Mr. Zhang does have an owner's license over there. Wouldn't be completely unprecedented to take an Entain to Hong Kong, but it's hard work. It's not a path that people have trod before. But look, he's obviously a very talented horse, and we sort of looking going forward. And the other thing too is, like, if you look at it from the perspective of, if you're a young stallion like Angel Capital coming in over the next couple of years, you're not going to get a better chance ever to be a good stallion than the quality of mares that he would get at Yulong, because they've got the best breed mare brand in Australia. And so, the opportunities for a young stallion like him to, take off on the basis that, yes, he may be a really strong, influential, important stallion, but he's going to get every chance possible with the quality that he's got to make an impact.
Sure, they'll send him again, possibly mares that are deserving of higher service fees stallions, but Mr. Zhang shown that he just backed his own stallions. Said there's very few mares to outside stallions, except for, a few to perhaps the champions, I'm Invincibles, Sinsels, and Savabille in New Zealand. Outside that, they all support his local, his own rosters. Again, Angel Capital, all those other ones. I think there's more to come at Yulong with stallions and so forth. So their rosters just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and have a look at the books of the type of mares that Pierata and Alabama Express had over the last couple of years, and just think like, how well, they're well positioned going forward in terms of, the quality of mares they're going to get. So it's a fascinating time. Obviously, the first stallion deal we've seen it this year, Tim. There's probably not a lot of colts available, especially in the 2-year-olds, but certainly not even in the 3-year-olds. And I think you pointed out in your article, there's only a couple of colts in the Blue Diamond this week that aren't already aligned with studs. So it's hard to get a deal done. And I know that a couple of studs out there are wondering if they're going to have a new horse this year, because it's hard to find those horses which are going to emerge and suddenly take on a profile of being a genuine stallion prospect.
Sure, and then buying them's one thing, and then you've got to be able to set them at a service fee where the investors can get their money back, after 3 and 4 years, hopefully being in front and they're a good stallion. But you've got to be able to stand at a fee that's commercially acceptable accepted by the market. So again, you've got to, outside Yulong and perhaps a couple others, where they can, again, don't have to be quite as considerate to the commercial angle. That's why it's very difficult for those other competitors.
We'll move on to wagering now, Tim. It's been a big week of news today in particular. We've broken a story this morning that Lachlan Fitt and Cameron Rogers, two of the most senior executives at Wagering Empire's Entain's Australian New Zealand operation, will be departing. They've announced that as of Thursday morning. So, big story breaking in the wagering space. Obviously, there's been a fair bit going on at Entain of late. They've had a departure of a couple of key executives, Calder Crew and Ryan Stanaway. Globally, they've had Gavin Isaacs, the CEO, depart quite suddenly, which was a bit of a shock last week we spoke about. And I guess there's also been the movements around the Ladbrokes Racing Club as well, the pulling back on the bloodstock aspect of that. So there's been a lot of moving space in this space. And Lachlan Fitt, the key for this, right, there's a couple of things. Lachlan Fitt has been a driving force at Entain over the last few years, both as Chief Financial Officer and also Deputy CEO. And obviously, Cameron Rogers has been involved extensively with what's gone on in New Zealand and has been with Entain for the past 2 years since they've taken over that New Zealand tab operation. But Lachlan Fit has also played a major role in that. And so this integration, I guess, between the New Zealand racing industry and Entain is at a really interesting point, because you've got a new CEO come on, Matt Balesti, who spoke about a couple of weeks ago, has come on board, or will be coming on board into the NZTR role. And the two biggest influences that Entain set to depart in a relatively quick time. And the view is here, both men have said it's not to do with what's gone on NZTR. It's not to do with Matt Balesti taking over. They support Matt. They look forward to continue to support him because they're still passionate about the New Zealand racing industry. But it does become at a very interesting time. And I think this is a really developing story, and one which we'll sort of be a bit more out of. Both men have said they've got new adventures on the horizon. We'll see what pans out with that, whether that's in concert with one another or on their own, we yet to see as well. But watch this space in that regard. And yeah, it's obviously an interesting time with Entain, Tim. I think, trend wise, they've been one of the biggest investors in wagering media over the past few years, and it appears that trend may be moving in the opposite direction.
Sure, you meant, Andy Hyde's also left and gone to heading up the media division at Racing Victoria. So, just a vacuum, I guess, of talent from Entain, and who's going to take that or take those positions and drive the company forward in a challenging period with Austrac and different things hanging over their head.
Yeah, exactly right. So there are a couple of other things as well. The Austrac enforcement currently taking place. Just on that, Lachlan Fitz said that there's nothing to do with that either. It's just because they've come to the end of their time, and him in particular has been involved in wagering for 11 years and is keen to try a new adventure. TAB, who was actually a former Tabcorp, a former employer of Lachlan Fitz. Actually, Lachlan was at Tabcorp before he was at Entain, announced their half-year results this morning, and probably some, I guess, positive. I guess, they couldn't afford much more negative things, but Gil McLaughlin's obviously been in charge since September. He's got his feet under the desk. He's obviously made some significant executive change, but I think probably that, to be perfectly honest, their somewhat disastrous sort of full-year results were pretty much taking out the trash from what happened previously and resetting moving forward, and that's allowed them to post some pretty positive results, I suppose. Group revenue grew by 10%. to 1.33 billion, while their EBITDA was up 12% comparison to last year on $190 million. So positive result there. The word fitter is a word that Yell keeps on coming up with, Tim, in terms of describing where he wants Tabcorp to be, but he did to say today's pleasing results demonstrate the company executing better, the outcomes of an improved cadence and culture of accountability. We've taken significant action over the last 6 months to improve our cost and capital discipline, which you can see today. When I joined Tabcorp, I said I was drawn to the value that can be unlocked within our unique set of strategic assets. Unlocking that value and taking a broader strategic focus will be the key to growing value for shareholders in the year ahead. So it is a positive. I think it'll be seen as a broadly positive result for Tabcorp and a reset moving forward. And I think it's the next step. I think we'll see probably a quite strong statement around their strategy going forward. And probably one of the biggest stories going around the wagering game this year, Tim, will be whether Tabcorp can renegotiate that New South Wales licence. They're already seeing value, I think $36 million from their Victorian licence being changed up, I suppose, across the board. Yeah, we'll probably see this year whether the New South Wales government are keen to renegotiate that deal. And if Tabcorp can get themselves in that position, that will change the game significantly.
Yeah, they've got obviously the retail licence. That's a big asset, possibly a drain on them during COVID and different things like that, but they still hugely recognised brand. They've got a lot to work with, and I'm sure Gil, certainly what he's done so far and what he, I guess, plans, that they're going to be a force. How much and how the market responds will be interesting to watch, but I'm sure, they're not going anywhere and a big, important player in the wagering ecosystem.
Moving on to racing now, and Tim, you covered a yarn yesterday, which got actually a lot of response and a lot of enthusiasm about it, which was the changes at Ciaron Maher Racing. This had been sort of spoken about in sort of circles for a little while. I guess a bit of a change in strategy. You spoke to Ben Salinger yesterday, the CEO of Ciaron Maher Racing, about where they're heading, their future direction. I mean, what was the tone of that conversation, Tim? Is there a sense here that this is an inflection point, or is it just changing the strategy of like a rapidly growing and evolving business?
Ben was, considering I cold called him, he was very open and honest of where things are at and where Ciaron Maher Racing and obviously headed by Ciaron where they want to be. And look, no one likes to see job losses. It has, it's they were sort of, I wouldn't say middle management, but they, there weren't stable staff mucking out boxes and things like that. There was, other office staff across, their sites at Ballarat, head office in Melbourne and in Sydney as well. So as Ben said, a small number, and no one likes to see job losses, of course, but they're just sort of resetting. Obviously, no stables invested more money in facilities, in data and science and, sports science and things like that over the last few years. But as we've seen, Ciaron's expanded into New South Wales, and at the moment, about 30% of the horses in training located in New South Wales. Ben said that they want to get it to about 50-50 split moving forward between Victoria and New South Wales. And also, it's been obviously with Lani Lodge possibly being tendered for at the end of the carnival, Anthony and Edward Cummings, their stable. There's talk that Ciaron may take over that or want to get to Randwick. Been confirmed they've been in discussions with the ATC for a couple of years about possibly getting a base at Randwick. Ciaron lives in the eastern suburbs. It would make sense, but obviously there's only a few stables available, or possibly, so it'd be interesting with the ATC grants Ciaron access, but that's what they want to do. Whether that means they shut Warwick Farm, I'm not sure, but a Randwick base seems fait accompli eventually for Ciaron, and where they want to head and reset, be obviously the dominant stable in Australia.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of discussion around the growth of the Ciaron Maher stable, numbers wise, and I guess they are a corporation. Like, that's the way that they work. Like, Ben Salinger is a CEO, and the fact you have restructures and rounds of redundancies and changes like that, that happens in all organisations and all companies at that level. And so that's the way that they think. So you strategically pivot one way or another way. Projects come along, you try to build things out. So, but it is interesting because we're not used to seeing this from a stable, because they are the first corporate stable we've seen in Australia. So that's probably.
Sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, Ben did make that point that they are structured differently to any other stable, and I guess a warning for the industry is they forecasting the next couple of years is in light of wagering downturns and PRAs possibly having to reduce prize money, that there is going to be a challenging couple of years for the industry. So they've already cut back their horse numbers by sort of 10 to 15%, as you said. That others probably haven't seen that, but that's what they've been doing. Those horses aren't quite up to the mark. They've told their owners either sell this horse or move it to Queensland or South Australia or wherever, but they have been sort of rationalising already, and these redundancies are sort of the next step of that, rebalancing the books, I guess, or rebalancing the business.
Yeah, interesting one. Of course, as I said, Ciaron keen to move more into at least his business more into the New South Wales focus, which is interesting, and that sort of nice little segue there into what's going on in New South Wales at the moment, Tim. And there's been a fair bit of discussion. What is interesting, I don't know, it's an interesting time in New South Wales racing, because there's been obviously a lot of politics over the last 12 months with what's gone on with the Rose Hill stuff and the inquiry and all that sort of stuff. And we're still sort of seeing the echoes of that. We've got the vote from the ATC members on April 3. We've got a pending petition, which is petitioning for the departure of Peter McGorran, the ATC chairman. There's still a bit to play out there. But in New South Wales Parliament this week, there's been a couple of stories that have sort of emerged out of that. The first is around this Racing New South Wales being established as a Crown Land Manager, which was approved in May last year, and they've taken over the Crown Land Management of 5 race courses. And it came out earlier this week that one of those race courses is a bit of a query over the process that took place, which is Queanbeyan, and how that was managed, I suppose. It's a bit of a nuanced, complex sort of case around about who approved it and who signed off at it and whether the department. Anyway, what has happened is the government has sort of basically taken a look at it now after questions from independent MP Mark Latham, and sort of admitted that the process doesn't quite look right to their eye and that the department probably needs to review that. So we'll see what happens with that. There's some questions over Coffs Harbour as well, which have been raised and were not necessarily responded from the government. There's questions around that. But then the other thing that was raised, which was significant, was the appointment or reappointment of David McGrath as an independent director at the ATC. Now, obviously, the ATC is highly political at the moment. There's a lot going on there. We had the elections in December, or November, we had a new candidate, Annette English, come on board, who was basically Save Rose Hill, and Tim Hale got re-elected. He's Save Rose Hill as well. So there's a bit going on with that. And now we've got, look, what I find honestly a bit strange about this whole situation with the David McGrath reappointment is we only find out that someone's been reappointed to the ATC board during a time of enormous political scrutiny. And it is the racing minister's job to reappoint these people and to appoint these people, usually through a panel, through appointment or whatever else. But we only find out this through a question in Parliament from Mark Latham that was answered by John Graham, who's representing the racing minister, because he's in the upper house and the racing minister the lower house. I don't need to explain that, but that's why he answered it. And so it just seems strange to me, Tim, that there's not more transparency around this stuff. In an era where people are saying, hey, we just want to know what's going on, a board member's been reappointed to the ATC board and there's no announcement from the government. And as far as I can see, maybe it has been announced to the ATC members. I'm not on an ATC membership list, so maybe it was pushed out to them, but this has come as a surprise to a few people. It's been rumoured for a few weeks. There's suggestion from Mark Latham that what has happened is not actually consistent with the initial act, that there have to be a selection committee. Look, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but it's still a bit messy, Tim, for me. It's still a little bit sort of like, it's not the way if you're under scrutiny, you'd really want to look with this stuff. So that's probably my question is sort of, moving forward, what does that look like? And in an era where there's more and more scrutiny on what's going on in the halls of power at the ATC and Racing New South Wales, and particularly how it relates to New South Wales Parliament and New South Wales government, like you would think you'd probably add a little bit more clarity around that.
Well, maybe it was unintentional, but as you say, as the minister, you would think, I know Mark Latham is going to go over everything we're doing in racing with a fine-tooth comb. Let's make sure we get this right. Let's put it out there. Let's tell people what's going on. Maybe was it the staffers that haven't done that in the minister's office? I'm not sure, but it's a bad look. That tell people what's going on at a crucial reappointment of that so-called independent. Well, David is an independent director, so to another 4-year term, as you say, at a crucial juncture for the ATC.
Yeah, and exactly right. And it comes after there was no really official acknowledgement that they'd also reappointed Racing New South Wales, or appointed the New South Wales deputy chairman last year. So it's all a bit sort of up in the air for me, and I think that probably needs, whether the communication is not where it needs to be. In an era where there's a lot of cynicism about the motives of what's going on, you would think, transparency is probably their friend in this situation. But anyway, we'll see what happens with that. And I'll no doubt, one thing for sure, Mark Latham's not going anywhere and not going to stop trying to throw difficult questions at the government around Racing New South Wales. And just have a look at the New South Wales parliamentary website on questions on notice, and you'll see Latham's been a very busy man when he's putting these questions forward. So look, again, some of them are more pointed than others, but a lot of them are very relevant questions about the function of New South Wales racing industry. And I know that, there's an enormous amount of, I guess, tension and animosity between the parties, particularly around what Latham's been doing. And I understand that, but some of the questions he's asking are actually really genuine questions about how racing should function and how much transparency there should be. All right, we move on from that now, and thanks for joining us on Straight Talk. That's it for this week. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you listen to us, whether it be on Podbean or on Apple, or Spotify, or YouTube, or wherever you are. And if you really love what we do and you really think it's really important, why not sponsor us? As I mentioned before, email editor@thestraight.com.au. Be happy to hear from you with an offer of support or whatever else you think might be worthwhile. Get your brand or whatever else associated with what we're doing here. We'll talk to you next week from the Melbourne Premier Sale. That's it for today, and thanks very much for your time.